What kind of calculating, cold act did you commit? My boss had a reputation for smashing keyboards and mice when he would get mad. So I bought a cheap wireless mouse and plugged the dongle into the back of his PC where no one would ever see it. I could look across the hall and kind of see when he was using the mouse, and I would just nudge the cursor enough that it would feel like there was something glitching. I got him to break another mouse that week. School bully showed up my work once to turn in an application. It was a cool, higher-paying job for teenagers. He asked me why I was there, and I told him I worked there. His attitude changed, and he begged me to put in a good word for him. I said, "Oh, sure thing." I walked in, went to my manager's office and told him, "So-and-so just applied. Please don't hire him. He bullied myself and others relentlessly." My manager crumpled up his app and threw it away. This girl who bullied me mercilessly in 6th grade came into the Chinese restaurant where I worked a few years later, and I crushed her fortune cookie when I put it in the bag. When I was 17, I worked at Pizza Hut and was allowed to bring home meals. Every so often my sister would call and ask for a personal pan. I would find new ways to hide jalapenos in it whenever she was being a bitch. She started getting good and would search for it. Some days I did nothing to it, and she'd still take it apart to make sure there wasn't a jalapeno in it. At one point I hid it inside the crust. Unless she tore it apart, she'd never find it. We were 2 years apart in age, and she was a little asshole in HS, so it was my best version of revenge. I had a narcissistic mom who made my life total hell, and my dad let it slip to me that it meant a lot to her for us to go shopping together for my prom dress. I had a part-time job and spent months saving THR money to buy everything myself from a thrift store. This was circa 1997, when that wasn't typically done. Dressed up and went alone. And it was her first taste of being eliminated from my life due to her endless painful emotional manipulations throughout my childhood. When I was a child, I was beaten quite often. To get back at my dad, I'd boop his toothbrush on my butthole. So I'd get beaten. He'd brush his teeth with a hint of butthole. I ran a painting company in college and did a lot of work in my own neighborhood. After completing most of the job, the neighbor called me and refused to pay at all unless the price was dropped. I explained that the only person he would be hurting would be me, as everyone else is still entitled to the money they worked for. The neighbor still demanded a price cut, which resulted in me paying to do the job. Shame he didn't get the color approved by the neighborhood HOA. One anonymous complaint later, and the neighbor had to pay to repaint it. A customer would come into my store and often deposited a candy bar wrapper into one of the shopping carts waiting in the entry like it was a garbage can. On many occasions he had told me how he was diabetic and only this specific errand for his wife, so he could sneak his favorite candy bars. After he disappeared out of sight, I retrieved his garbage and waited. When I saw him approaching my register, I quickly dropped the wrapper in the shopping bag that I put the cans of dog food he was purchasing into. I hope he never looked in the bag and just went home and left it for his wife to put away so she would discover his sneaky snack. I do know it was several weeks before I saw him again. I only took the trash out last night because I didn't want my finance to find the bag of the good lunch I had without him. I did inventory in the hotel meat freezer. I'm a chef. Once, when I worked in a very competitive office, I noticed that a coworker always took credit for my ideas. So I started sending him fake and meaningless proposals while he saved the good ones to present directly to our boss. Before long, his reputation plummeted and I was promoted. It was a calculating act, but I felt it was the only way to ensure my work was recognized. Smiling face. Nice try, Santa. Had a coworker that would leave her spot frequently to go to the bathroom, aka go for a smoke break. We work on a conveyor belt, so I had to keep picking up her slack. If I didn't, then the belt would jam up. She would leave several times in a single shift every day and always came back smelling like ciggy smoke. One day she left, and then the boss of the managers walked down the aisles to inspect the belts. I told her that the person next to me went out the door and had been gone for a while, so the boss went to look for her. Coworker came back immediately and apparently tried to hide behind a semi-trailer in the yard. Previous manager was a totally horrible person. I'll spare the details. She ran our team into the ground, then laid a bunch of us off, myself included, a year ago. Then she found another job 2 months later and left. I recently found out she started her own consulting company and announced it on a popular job social media site. What she failed to do was to secure the domain names and social media handles for the new business venture. I took every variation I could think of. Get fucked. Wife and I are separated. She was still signing in on my Netflix account. I waited until she was up to a series finale of a show, then signed out all devices and changed the password. I let my SIL plan an event after she had spent the last event complaining about everything. Never seen someone eat crow so hard. I completely moved out when my now ex was on a fishing trip. Yes, I took my bed and my flat screen that was in our bedroom. He came home late at night after driving 10 hours to no bed. And most importantly, no more punching bag me. I played a draw 4 on my child during their very first game of Uno. I did it when they went down to 1. You're gonna learn there's no allies in Uno, kiddo. Me and a friend catfished a girl, before that was a term, who bullied us relentlessly on ICQ. So like 1998. And she bullied everyone. So we told everyone. Small town, small school. She bragged about her, cooler than the rest of you losers, online friends. Then she found out it was us. And that everyone knew. And that she'd said incredibly nasty things about everyone. She switched schools that week. How? You ask. A mutual friend that she had also bullied had moved to the city, and she introduced the bully to her cool new city friends online. But no, it was just us. Not proud of that. But I did it. In college, I was in a group with a guy who was being kind of a jerk to me. One day we were in kind of a study group, and he got up to go to the bathroom. I saved what he'd been working on his laptop and closed it, then opened a blank document and saved it as nearly the same thing, biology paper instead of biology paper or whatever, then sat back in my seat. When he came back, I let him have about 45 seconds of pure panic before I couldn't take it and told him what I'd done. He was a fan of pranks and liked to mess with his roommate, so he wasn't too mad at me. It felt good to stick it to him a bit. It wasn't planned, but when the opportunity arose, I took it. In middle school, I was texting my crush and shared something personal. They then turned around and used it against me in a cruel way. Fast forward to my early 20s. We ran into each other, and he asked me out on a date. I shot him down for what he did right in front of his friends. While it wasn't too harsh, it felt great, lol. When I was leaving America to come home to Australia after finishing a 6-month overseas secondment, the other seconded, who had been a backstabbing piece of shit the entire time, was scheduled to fly back with me. The night before our very early flight home, I took him out to drinks and got him wasted, checked into his flight, turned his phone alarm from AM to PM, put his phone on D&D mode, and dropped him back at the hotel. At 4 a.m. when in my cab to the airport, I casually called him about 60 times knowing he'd never see the calls, left him half a dozen voice emails, and took the most relaxing flight home. I know a woman who's, to be blunt, heinous. She loves animals, and that's more or less her only redeeming quality. I finally told her off a couple years ago, but prior to that she seemed to think we were friends, and so asked me for advice regarding whether or not she should take a big personal risk. I told her yes, I thought it was a great idea for her to leave the state, move to Texas for law school, start a new life there, and never come back. And she did. But then she couldn't hack it and ended up moving back here anyway. But for about a year I was very pleased with myself. When I was in year 5, a bully used to follow me home to intimidate me. He did this for a couple days in a row. On the 3rd day, I hid some sticks under a tree on the way to school, and when he followed me there I hit him with the sticks. I broke up with my abusive partner right before a big vacation he had planned. I finally realized I wasn't happy in the relationship, and I didn't want to waste money or time on a trip pretending everything was okay. It felt cold, but it was the right decision for my own well-being. I replaced the ice maker in my freezer. The new one still does not work. So much for cold calculations. A deer had been hit with a car. It couldn't stand. It was dying. It was crying out in pain. It was also blocking the road. And even a dying animal can be dangerous if it starts flailing around panicked. So I shot it. It died much quicker, and it was saved a lot of pain. I pulled it off the road, cleaned my hands, went back on my way. Ex-fiancée cheated on me with her boss. I was devastated. I really thought she was the one. I also knew that the company had a zero-tolerance policy against that type thing between anyone and their direct manager. Spent a couple months working things out with her until I had all the proof I needed. Emailed his boss, all other managers, HR, and corporate every condemning screenshot I had. They both ended up fired, and I still have no regrets. He knew we were engaged and finally offered her a promotion to get her to sleep with him, and I had a copy of that screenshot too. I waged a mail war against a former boss. Back in the days before the internet, Publishers Clearinghouse would send out a big sheet of stamps that you could use to sign up for magazines. My boss /* loved / magazines. So much so that he'd sign up for a dozen or so every time. He'd sign up for free cruises, vacation property, timeshares, religious shit like the Book of Mormon, and the Watchtower, and all kinds of stuff. Why? One time he signed up for a super hardcore gay BDSM magazine using a money order. He put his name on it correctly, but accidentally sent it to his neighbor's house. Twice. As a kid, I unplugged the bouncy house while children were inside of it, which I now realize is dangerous, but it was funny when I was 6. There was a mean girl who bullied 2 of my good friends throughout high school. The 3 of them went to another school, so I'd met her but didn't know her well at all. I saw her a few years later working retail over uni winter break. She tried to greet me and talk about how we had friends in common, aka my friends she bullied for being poor. I acted like I didn't know who she was, and it really burned her. Her ego was such that anyone should remember her. I did, but pretended not to. Felt like the right kind of revenge for my friends. The mean old lady across the street yelled at my daughter as she was walking our dog, so I signed her up for the Church of Scientology. I once secretly replaced my roommate's coffee with decaf for a whole week just to see if he'd notice. He started questioning his entire existence by day 3, wondering why he was so tired all the time. Cold, calculating, and utterly hilarious. A GF left me for a dude that approached her while she was at work. They ended up traveling together in the States. I had a friend that knew the guy, and he was apparently legally married to someone else. I kept that information to myself for years, while they supposedly enjoyed their relationship. Eventually she reaches out to Ick, let me know he was married for some reason. I said I knew all this time. She called me a devil LOL. I wrote a scathing exit interview about my old boss when I left. My ex-boyfriend was cheating on me with a man. It wasn't the other man part. It was the cheating that miffed me the most, as he confessed in front of our entire gaming group, and they all stopped talking to me. The dumb mofo had the nerve to ask me to fix his resume for him, so he could find a job. I converted it so every single letter was in its own table cell, so it would be damn near impossible to edit, and in the footer wrote, I'm a cheater and I'm not trustworthy in white. He had a very hard time finding a job and had to live with mommy for several extra years. I imagine his boyfriend, that he also cheated on, figured it out, because he messaged me several years after the fact that I was awful. I didn't need context. I once strategically forgot to invite a troublemaker to a group project meeting. When I caught my ex cheating, after making a record of it, I waited till she was on her way to work the next morning and sent a text using the pet name her and the other guy used. Waited about 5 to 10 minutes and then sent, yeah, I know. As I'm sure you can guess, we are no longer together. Wanted to give her a heart attack and ruin her whole day. Mission accomplished. I cut in half the last part of cake at my job, so I didn't have to clean the plate. A sergeant used excessive punishment against me for a trivial matter. I misplaced eye protection that didn't fit over my glasses. Later, when I found out he misplaced one of his gloves, I threw it away.